So it's 3 o'clock. It's time to begin. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us this next hour, this important hour to spend with us. So we appreciate your time. I'm just going to start the same way I start, which is a reminder for us as listeners that we listen with a couple of dispositions. The first disposition is offered from the National Equity Project, which is my experience is not up for debate. So we're here to learn and listen. The second disposition is by American Indian writer Silko, who says, "My stories are not for your entertainment." So these stories are not for entertainment. These are stories for a call to action. As educators, it's our responsibility to listen to our students and see our students so well that we're able to identify and support them to get to their highest future potential. So I want to begin and hand it over to our students right away for a land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Fabiola. And we'd like to give a proper acknowledgement not only to the land that this panel is taking place on, but also the people who originated on this land. We would like to take this time to honor and acknowledge those who came before us and those who occupied this land before all of us. There are 4 different tribes native to the San Diego County area. They are the Kumeyaay, the Payonkowicham, the Kupeño, and the Kuya. Our ancestors tended to this land for millennia before periods of colonization culminated in broken treaties and stolen land. Today, our words carry prayers for our elders. They are people of much culture, strength, and resilience. Today, our words carry prayers for our elders and ancestors that came before us. Thank you. And I'd like to pass it on to Fabiola again.
Thank you so much for opening our space in that way. And I know just as we're about to hear from our students, I know myself, and this is a group that I want to make sure that I'm a better ally to every single day. And the choices that I make daily and how I behave and how I show up as an educator. So I'm really feel the privilege of being in this space with you to learn from your stories. So thank you. So we try to understand a little bit about the population that we're serving, and just wanted to give you some numbers and thinking through about just how many we have, how many American Indians we have. The United States has federally recognized tribes. We have over 573. In California, we have over 720,000 American Indian population, and in San Diego, 20,000. We have student enrollment of about 2,400. So this is a population that we as educators need to make sure that we highlight, that we help, that we support, that we listen to, and again, that we help to see the light and be able to show them and support them into their future potential, their brightest future potential possible. And I'll pass it on to Ms. Felicia.
Thank you, Dr. Fabi. So it's also important for us to recognize that prior to European contact, hundreds of different native tribes once made up the population of the land that is today known as California. So this is what this image represents. And as you can see, it is quite vast and quite diverse. Next slide, please. 2 centuries ago, or over 2 centuries ago now, over 100 different languages and or dialects were spoken within the boundaries of what is now known as the state of California. Before colonial contact, California had more linguistic variety than all of Europe. The indigenous languages of California belong to as many as 20 major language families, contributing to California being the most linguistically diverse area in North America. Next slide, please. And like Dr. Fabi said, it is with tremendous honor and just really privilege and respect that I was chosen to introduce our college moderators for today. You all are in for just a great experience and opportunity in hearing the stories of these young people. And it is who's going to lead us in the conversation, our college moderators, in Priscilla Ortiz, who is a student at Haskell Indian Nations University. And with Priscilla, we have Anthony Hurtado, who is a student at University of California, San Diego.
Our moderators are going to lead us through the questions. I will now stop our share, and Priscilla and Anthony, you go ahead and begin.
Hi, thank you for that. I'd like to start by introducing myself in my language first. So, Miriam Cheltenham, Nutung Priscilla Non Kumiai and Param Kuchum, No Kwam Patty Duro, Antoinette Duro, and John LaChapa. Known Vice President, Student Government Association, Haskell Indian Nations. Hello, everyone. My name is Priscilla Ortiz. I am Kumiai and Param Kuchum. My grandparents that I have with me today are Patty Duro, Antoinette Duro, and John LaChapa. And I'd just like to state that I am the Vice President of the Haskell Indian Nation Student Government Association. And I'm glad to be here with you guys today. And I'd like to start by dedicating this conversation to my younger sister, Trinidad Juarez. Her passion and drive for success amazes me every day. And I see that same passion and drive for success with the students here today. So I'd like to start by asking some of our panelists who they'd like to dedicate this conversation to. And I'll start with our friend Adam.
Thank you. My name's Adam. I'm from La Jolla Band of La Señor Indians. I dedicate this conversation to the people that have helped me get to where like I am right now, and that have given me the confidence and the ability to just like know, usually, you know. Also to the people that don't have a voice, that are unfortunate enough to actually speak up against what they have been dealing with. So I'm representing them.
Awesome. I'm sure they're proud of you today. Lucinda, who would you like to dedicate this conversation to?
Hauka Minita Mewa Lucinda Winachi Michael Pai. Hello, good afternoon everyone. My name is Lucinda Blanco. I identify as a Kumeyaay Native American.
I think we're losing you a little bit, Lucinda. Okay, I think we're gonna wait for her connection to get a little better and we'll come back to you. But we're gonna move on to our friend Malia. Could you introduce us and let us know who you're dedicating this conversation to?
Malaya. Hi guys, I'm Malaya Pohas. I'm a member of the La Jolla Band of Lusania Indians, and I'd like to dedicate this conversation to my family who always drives to push me to succeed and stand for what I believe in, and the people who are allowing us to have this conversation and documenting it.
Awesome. I'm sure they're so proud of you for taking this healthy risk. Lucinda, how are you feeling with your internet connection now?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's coming back a little quick.
So, Hauka Minita Mewa Lucinda Winachi Sample Squad Michael Pai. Hello, good afternoon everyone. My name is Lucinda Blanco. I identify as a Kumeyaay Native American, and I like to dedicate this conversation to the Sample Squad elders because I feel like they should be proud of how far the young youth and generation have come.
That's awesome. Jake, who would you like to dedicate this conversation to today?
Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, that's embarrassing. Hauka, Mimitameniwe, Jake Winechuhi, Tukumuko Pai. Hello, everyone. My name is Jake Hawkman. I identify as a Kumeyaay Native American from Mesa Grande, and I'm dedicating this conversation to the Native American Indian Youth Center and Melissa Alimon because they are always there to help support our youth.
Awesome. All right, and lastly, or second to lastly, our friend Miracle. Who would you like to dedicate this conversation to?
Hello, my name is Miracle. I identify as a Kumeyaay Native American, and I'd like to dedicate this conversation to my mother and as well as my teacher, Mari Mann, because they've inspired me and encouraged me to be an empowered young person and to just be successful in the world and to do things that they couldn't do.
That's amazing. And I'm sure they're going to be proud of the work that you do in the future too. And then now, lastly, Anthony, who would you like to dedicate this conversation to?
Miriam notung Anthony Ika non washnai pinon tan atom no kwam Josephine Cole P Gary Hurtado Yuka. Hello everybody, my name is Anthony. I'm from the Rincon Band of Senyu Indians, and I'm also tan atom. My grandparents are Josephine Cole, Ben Gary Hurtado, and Mariana Norris. And I want to dedicate this conversation to all of the Native youth throughout the country who are currently struggling with domestic abuse, drug abuse, or just not doing very well in school. I want to dedicate it all to them. And so to carry things along, the next question that we have for the panelists is what is your experience with oh wait, what are some assumptions about Native Americans that you have experienced? And for me, one assumption that I can recall experiencing was back in high school when some non-native person asked me how much money do I get. So they were basically asking how do you get per cap. So they just automatically assume that all Native Americans get some paycheck from a casino, and when in fact I personally I don't. My tribe doesn't do that for me. We don't get paychecks like that every month, and it just showed the ignorance that this person has and how much they're not willing to think before they say anything. And at the time, I didn't realize how ignorant it was and how biased it sounded. But now I realize that um, this could potentially be harmful to kids who aren't as fortunate as other Native students or Native youth whose families are in a more well off position.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's one experience that one assumption that I've experienced. And to carry it off, Miracle, what are some assumptions about Native Americans that you've experienced?
Some assumptions that I've experienced is just that, like you were saying, the income and government assistance is more easily provided. Things such as like EBT, food stamps, those things that we can get those things more easily than other people can, or even college funding. And that's not the case. It's just as hard for us as it would be for anyone else to get college funding or any government assistance.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Lucinda, what are some assumptions about Native Americans that you've experienced?
I would have to say, like, I could agree with the both of you. The common assumptions we get is that we get a source of money or income from the casinos, or that because we are Native American and we live on a reservation, we get per capita, which some Native Americans don't, and some are still fighting to get enrolled to get it. So those have to be the two assumptions I get.
Mm, yeah. So by now you can tell that there's a big misconception and stereotype that a lot of natives get per cap.
Mm-hmm.
Malaya, what are some assumptions about Native Americans that you've experienced?
Well, of course, the per cap thing, even recently, but I think a toxic assumption is when learning about Native American culture, we rarely even learn about it in history classes, and that when we do, they just assume it's all perfect and golden and just, oh, Thanksgiving, it was a nice trade, but that has a big effect and plays into the ignorance, like you guys, all three of you have demonstrated.
Of course. Mm-hmm. Adam, what are some assumptions that you've experienced about Native Americans?
Or assumptions I've heard from people is that usually when they think of Native youth, they think of fighters or drug abusers, just because the way they live, and overall just bad kids, which is not true most of the time.
Right. Yeah. Um, Jake, what are some assumptions about Native Americans that you might have experienced?
One of them, to continue, guys, like off you guys, is that we all receive per cap and we all get to go to college for free. And another one is that we're all just uneducated savages who like to drink beer and do drugs and just live a bad life.
Yeah, that's a very harmful stereotype that a lot of natives face is that we're nothing but alcoholics that people say. And that's really harmful that people say that about us.
Mhm.
Priscilla, what are some assumptions that you've experienced?
One assumption that I'd like to shine light on is kind of along what Malaya was saying, but in a different sense about cultural education. A lot of people seem to think that if you're just a little bit of native, you're full native, you do your traditions, you go to ceremony, you sing the songs and dance the dances. When in reality, that's not true. And not a lot of natives have access to their cultural resources because at some point in time, all of our tribes were taken away from their homelands and displaced from their traditions. So a lot of our knowledge was lost, and only a fraction of our traditions were able to be saved. So even the traditions and the cultural things that we do today is only a small percentage of what our original peoples did in the past. And like even today, our elders, our reservation elders don't want to talk about traditional things because they still have that trauma-driven fear from the missionaries and from the boarding schools where you couldn't speak your language or carry out any of your traditions. And I grew up a lot hearing about my grandparents' experience with school, and it was brutal. But today I kind of want to talk about the racism that occurs today within our school systems. And today I want to talk about racism that happens in the schools because I've seen it for myself. I've seen a different form of racism, a form of racism that happens between our own people, and that's intertribal racism. And a lot of our native peoples, our young people, they're really proud of where they come from, and we don't want our students to feel any less proud. But sometimes it goes as far as them taking anger out and trying to start turf wars between each other when we all come from the same nation. Like today, when I introduced myself, I didn't say that I was from Rincon or Santa Isabel. I said that I'm Kumeyaay and I'm Payamquitcham because I'm more than just the tribe I come from. I'm made up of the two whole nations. The Kumeyaay with 18 different bands that stretches from here down to Southern California, Baja California, and Liseño with the 8 other tribes who build us up. And I just hope that our kids today can see that they're part of a nation, something greater than themselves, so that they don't end up, creating more generations, more kids that grow up hating each other for no reason, because there's no real reason to hate anybody from, another res. We're all the same people. We all went through the same things to a degree. So that's just some of the racism I saw in my school. But Jake, is there any type of racism or experiences that you've had that have negatively affected you throughout your school?
For myself, I was targeted actually in elementary school by a group of boys who tried to cut my hair in the bathroom. And luckily, one of the campus securities was there to stop it. And also, I was always being singled out by teachers to explain things certain things from other tribes, and they would always get mad when I responded that I didn't know, because I only knew Kumeyaay ways, they'd ask me about other tribes, about the Lakotas and about the Navajos, or the Hopi, and I'd always have to say I have no idea what they're talking about, and yeah.
That's a very unfair position that those teachers put you in. I'm sorry that you had to experience that, Jake. But I think it's good that we shine light on these situations so that other staff know that what's going on within their schools. So moving forward from that, Malaya, is there anything that you've experienced that you'd like to speak out on?
Well, stereotypes again, because I play different types of sports, so I'm surrounded by predominantly non-natives for certain sports. So we have a bunch of drills that are named after Indians, like Indian dribble, Indian run, stuff like that. And even some of my closest friends and people just growing up always called me a bunch of racial slurs. And then recently, I think a month ago, we were on the topic of colonization in history class, and our teacher asked us, this has stuck with me, and he asked us if the justification of Christopher Columbus killing all the natives, not all of them, but millions of them, is justified. And one of the kids in my class said it's justified because if natives didn't die, then we wouldn't have iPhones today. So that's kind of stuck with me a lot.
ugly to hear, and I'm sorry that you had to hear that, Malia. Wow, that threw me because that's such an off thing that you hear in the middle of class. Um, Lucinda, is there any experience that you'd like to share?
For me, there has been a couple times at school with my peers or friends where they make me feel outcasted from my culture because they fit me into the stereotype that all Native Americans have the red skin color. So they would always tell me that I look too pale or too white to fit into my culture or be a part of it because I don't fit into the red skin stereotype of a Native American.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I feel like I experienced something like that too, like especially in the Valley Center school system, like being, most of the time you're the only Native in your friend group and you're always used as like the butt of the Indian joke, like, oh, you can go buy us lunch, you get per cap, don't you? And then again, like you said, it being used against you that you're Native. You're not dark enough, you don't look Native, why are you going to the res, so it's awful. I'm sorry that you had to go through that, Lucinda. Adam, would you like to share any forms of racism that you've experienced on your schools?
Personally, I feel like I have experienced racism, but I use like those experiences as teachable moments because usually what happens when someone like I'll use a teacher touching my gourd, for example. They touched it one time and I was like, whoa, 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 take it easy, don't do that. They were like, why is that? And I was like, and I decided to teach them instead of start getting mad at them because they don't know. So how can you get mad at someone that doesn't know what like the culture is?
Yeah.
That's how I like to use it.
Oh, that's very smart. That's resourceful. And second to lastly, again, our friend Miracle. Are there any experiences that you'd like to share?
I think, like you were saying, the intertribal discrimination, it's a really big problem. It's a really big issue that's not talked about enough. I've seen people get in fights just from saying you were from one reservation because they don't like each other. And why? We're all the same, it doesn't matter. Or as well as how much Native are you? Well, are you enrolled? That's also another discrimination that's like intertribal. If you're not enrolled, well, oh, you're not really tribal kind of thing, in which I've experienced a lot. Another thing is just like being singled out in school. I mean, pretty much like I remember the kids from the reservation were literally put in different room because they didn't want us interacting with the other children because they thought that we would start fights and arguments.
That's no good. The systems are failing us, guys. But that's why we're opening up these conversations. So I do want to applaud you guys for sharing your experiences. And then I just want to ask my fellow moderator here, Anthony, what experiences with racism have you had in, going to public school?
Yeah, there is one incident that really sticks out to me just because it garnered such a huge reaction from not only me, but the whole Native body that I went to school in. Because I went to Valley Center High School, and there's a very prominently sized large group of Native students that go to that school, compared to other ones. And what happened was it was California Indian Day, and we decided to celebrate by bringing bird singers and dancers to the school. And it was during lunch, and we were all in the quad, and they were singing and dancing, and someone on the side decided to take a picture. Some non-Native person decided to take a picture, and they posted it on one of their private accounts saying, "Why don't you all go back to your own country?" And it's just so crazy how people could say something like that. Like, how ignorant do you have to be to even think that way? Like, you're on our land, what are you saying? And of course they try to play it off as just a joke, and all their friends got behind it like, no, it was just a joke, like, get over it, why are you taking it as such a big deal? And I'm like, no, you don't say things like that. And what happened was all of us Native students got together, and we rallied up where that person usually sits in school. They weren't there. We decided to occupy their space, and we just, as a small community within the school, we decided to like talk to each other about issues that we know and just bring about more awareness into the school. And I don't think it was any sort of overreaction at all. I think it was what we did was completely appropriate because those issues just aren't talked about where we're from, Valley, and where we're from.
Yeah.
Because yeah, it's like you just know it's there. You know that there's prejudice and people say things, whether or not they say it to your face, but you just know that there's like some sort of contempt.
Yeah, some like it's racial tension really. And like
Mhm.
me and Anthony, we grew up going to the Valley Center School District. And a lot of their racism is gaslit. They like to gaslight us and try to make us believe that it never really happened, or we're overreacting, or we're just being, mean, crazy Indians, always wanting to start a fight. Because I remember, I think we were like sophomores or juniors when that happened. And that's what a lot of people were trying to say, or even like our own other natives were trying to rile us up, like, oh, if there isn't a girl that goes and beats her up, you're not really native, So it's like it was a crazy week that week. But it made us natives that were attending the high school, it made us open our eyes to see that, that they don't see us the way we thought they saw us. We're kind of, like I said, the butt of the joke most of the time.
Mm-hmm. And with that, I'd like to carry it on to the next question, which is who or what has been most helpful for you in becoming an empowered young person? And for me personally, the who or what is the Rincon Indian Education Center, which is where I went to after school for throughout most of my school years, probably from all the way from primary school to high school. I went after school where I could just get homework done, and it was a space where academics was taken seriously. And I think it's such a huge big deal to me because I think without it, I wouldn't have been academically inclined as I am now. Because where I'm from, there's not really any spaces where you can be academically in tune, just because that sort of thing isn't taken seriously where we're from, and because a lot of our parents, they didn't go to college, so they never really took it seriously. But it was the education center that really cared about my education, and they pushed me to go to college, and they gave me a lot of different resources that helped me learn more about college. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have known anything. Probably I would have had to do a lot of it on my own, which would have been harder, just because I don't know how to do that. I didn't know how to do that, and so yeah, the education center is a pillar in my life and my educational career because it just helped me so much, and I'm so thankful for everybody who helped me and taught me, and yeah, that's mine. And um, Lucinda, who or what has been most helpful for you in becoming an empowered young person?
For me personally, I would have to say my dad and the Sample School Education Department. Growing up, my dad would tell me stories about how him and his cousins didn't really have the resources like the Sample School Education Department that they had growing up. So that really opened my eyes to make me realize that I have a good support system, like you said, to get the academically help. And that really helped me growing up now, even in high school, to get my education up and to focus on education and careers. And they helped me a lot with that. So I'd have to say my dad and the education department.
It's nice. I like that. Adam, who or what has been most helpful for you in becoming an empowered young person? Would you say?
For me, I would have to say I'm gonna use the term mentors as like a broad term because there's many people who have helped me like get to where I'm at or where I am, and that ranges from like my parents to just my family to teachers like my language teacher. They all just like a couple of them pushed me to do academic work. Some of them pushed me to just be a better version of myself, and then some of them pushed me to go beyond my limits to like just make myself a better person.
Awesome. Nice. Jake, who or what has been the most helpful for you in becoming an empowered young person?
Um, I would I would have to say a lot of people actually. You know, I'd have to start with my parents, and then my cultural teachers have given me the strength. But not only myself, but they've also helped empower others around our Native community here.
Nice. I love that your parents are so strong. Malaya, who or what has been most helpful for you in becoming an empowered young person?
Well, again, like mentors I've had in the past, my parents and my family, and mainly my grandpa. He since passed, but he attended one of the boarding schools, and he was like in the midst of all that. And so I kind of strive like because I would ask him like, "Hey, how was it like growing up?" And he would be like hesitant to tell me because it was just so traumatizing. So I kind of want to just go and get an education and become a voice for young people more and more so we could keep our culture strong and make people like him and people who had to go through that also know that what they went through had some sort of positive outcome.
Nice. Miracle, what about you? Who or what has been most helpful for you in becoming an empowered young person?
Who or what has been most helpful to me has been my mom, for one. She always just has pushed me to do my best. I'll actually only be the second person to graduate in my family, my first on my father's side. So I'm really excited about that. Um, Another person would be my teachers, Mari Mann and Serena from my academy. They just go above and beyond any teacher should even have to or even think about. They go the extra mile for their students, especially me. I wouldn't be graduating without them. As well as Ms. Deborah Cuero, who is the reservation educational director for Campo Indian Reservation. And she opened up the school so that there was access on the reservation, in which we didn't have for a long time. So we just got this school 2 years ago, and it's the first access that we've had on the reservation. So I am really grateful for that, as well as other students who are so grateful for her.
Right. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And lastly, Priscilla, who or what has been most helpful for you in becoming an empowered young person?
I feel that the people who helped me become so empowered were the women in my life. Firstly, my grandmother Patty and my great aunt Rose. They were both researchers who always spoke up um, for the best interest of the tribe. And then following that is my grandmother Antoinette, who raised 6 kids on her own and has worked hard to make sure that all her grandchildren are well equipped for life and school. Um, I'd also like to acknowledge my mother, who pulled herself out of addiction to get me and my siblings out of foster care and back home to the reservation, where we were able to learn our culture and be active citizens of our reservation and tribal community. And then also the women that I work with, Miss Amy and Miss Esmeralda, their passion for youth started back, well, me experiencing their passion for youth started back when I joined the Rincon Youth Storytellers in the 3rd grade. And their passion and drive still continues to this day as I'm a sophomore in college. They're helping youth all the time in any way that they can. And they're my 2 biggest supporters and my greatest advocates. Um, and sorry, I'm losing my place. But all these adults have impacted me, and every adult that works with youth has the power to impact youth for the rest of their lives. And especially the adults in our school, they have that same power. So I'd like to ask our students today, what might you want or need from the adults in your school system? And I'd like to start by asking Miracle.
Something I think that's needed in the school system would be a guidance counselor, but not just any guidance counselor, a guidance counselor who knows the community, so that way the kids can really open up in confidence and feels that kind of relatability, that kind of just compassion and understanding that they need. I think that would be really helpful to just have someone from the community to be able to talk and express with for these kids. It would really help them a lot.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Malia, what are some things that you would want from your adults?
Well, from the staff, I guess like more hammered down punishments for ignorance and racism that we experience in other races too. Like we might like I go to Valley Center High School too, and there's a broad community of natives, but I feel like we're outnumbered, especially with some of the other races, and always shut down. And also like more representation. Like I know that they allow us to have like California Indian Day, they allow us to show our culture and stuff, but like I don't really see an issue with letting us do it like more than once a year, and for other cultures and races too. I feel like we're not really represented.
Yeah, I think that's something too, especially with Valley Center. To give the people who don't know what Valley Center is like, they have 5 surrounding tribes: Paula, Palma, La Jolla, Rincon, and San Pasqual. And our native community makes up a large portion of the student community. Yet they don't teach, like we said, they barely touch on the surface of Native American history. They allow us one cultural event a year, even though they have a whole you know um, category for us called Title VI students. They have a whole category for Native American students set aside, yet the resources and people available to our Native students are insufficient, or not being carried out. So yes, Malia, thank you for shining light on that lack of cultural awareness that our teachers don't have right now, that we've been asking for a long time. But to keep this conversation going, I'd like to ask Lucinda, what do you expect of the adults around your school?
I would have to agree with what Miracle, Malila, and what you said, Priscilla, that one, they could have a better counseling and guidance system, because it does feel, though, as a Native American student, like you said, they don't shed light and awareness towards us that much. So they always make us feel like we're outcasted when we need help with school or academic. And I would think that the school district, especially at the high school, should be have an open mind and awareness that because of our culture, there are certain things that we do that we have to miss school for, like ceremonies and special events that we have culture that they overlook, and it feels like they need more empathy towards us.
Yes, empathy. I think that's the key word of this year. I hear it everywhere. Um, but yeah, it takes a great deal of empathy to work with, you know, communities like ours. Jake, I'd like to ask you the same question. What are some things that you expect from the adults around your school?
I would like for the adults and staff to be more open minded and involved to help voice our concerns about anything that goes on throughout the school. And also, I'd like for the staff and teachers to be more understanding for when kids have to miss school due to ceremonies, or like if they're going to go to powwows, or whatever it may be. That they're always not so hard for when they have to miss school and then they come back.
Mm. Yeah, that's something to you guys are giving me great ideas to talk about things, but on the same track as Jake, I think just reminding teachers of the different religious practices that Native Americans have. I know a lot of non-Native communities, when someone passes, you may take the day that you find out to grieve, and then the day for the funeral, which is usually on a weekend for non-Natives. But for Native Americans, the grieving process starts as soon as that person passes, and it lasts, sometimes over a week and then some, because we do our ceremonies. We have to round up, all of their possessions and cover their pictures, and just do a lot of familial stuff that you can't go to school for. And a lot of schools don't really understand that process. But it's something that a lot of our students go through, because a lot of us on the reservation, we have really interlocked families and communities where if one person passes, it will most likely affect 10 or more students on campus that need to miss for those days, or need to take time off to grieve, or even just take time to help their mother who can't get out of bed because they're so depressed that their grandma passed away. It's Native communities are interlocked, and I don't think that non-Native communities understand that as much as we do, because we've lived in it for such a long time. But yes, thank you, Jake, for shining light on that. Who haven't I asked yet? Oh yes, our friend Adam. What are some things that you'd like to ask from the adults around you in your school?
Personally, I would love the adults to ask more questions like about the culture, and just keep a quote in mind. No dumb question is a dumb question as long as you're trying to learn.
Mm.
As well as just be there for their students and have the ability to motivate. Like you can't just give up on us because we won't do it. Sometimes it takes a little bit more effort, but once they get the ball rolling, it will just keep on rolling and rolling.
Awesome. That's kind of the same thing me and Anthony experienced this weekend. We had a presentation with the Oceanside Library, and one of the teachers asked us, like, what would we share for, or what would she say? Like, what would you recommend for a non-native visiting tribal lands or a native place? And we said, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask us questions because we know Indians have these mean mugs. I'm looking at all you guys right now, not smiling. But like I said, like, see, like as soon as I pointed all that out, you guys smiled with the biggest smiles. Native peoples really are the most generous, humorous, type of people out there. And we're open to share information all the time. So yeah, Adam, like Adam said, ask questions, ask us questions. But respectfully ask us questions. Don't ask those stereotype questions. Ask deeper questions. What is your tribe? Do you feel connected to your tribe right now? What are some resources that your community needs? Ask present day questions because we're here right now. Our communities are living and breathing right now. I think, oh, and then I ask Anthony. Or yeah, Anthony.
Yeah, it kind of just piggybacks on what everyone was saying is, connection. Like what Adam said, don't give up on us. I think it's really important for teachers, especially to build relationships with Native students because as Native people, connection and community orientedness is very integral to us as Native people, and we're not very individualistic. It's always a matter of how this affects the community, and so I think it's important for teachers to recognize that and recognize the individual struggles and differences that Native students have and the ideas and creativity that they can bring to the table. I think it's all a matter of just recognizing them and helping bring their voice out because a lot of Native students don't like to speak up usually. We're very submissive in some sense, especially in the classroom. So it's important for teachers to recognize that about Native students and their identities in order to build a stronger connection between staff and students. And so that was my take on it. And for the last question, this is tying into the recent events in terms of the pandemic and the shutdown. And we just wanted to ask, are there any situations that you would like to talk about that have worsened or happened that have been exacerbated during the pandemic? And a situation that I've noticed that is kind of goes beyond just the Native community, everybody in general, but is kind of exacerbated in Native youth is school. Obviously, it's online, and a lot of Native youth are having struggling to hold interest in school just because they're not present, and some of them don't have the resources because a lot of Natives live out on the reservation where you don't get the best connection. So that's one thing that I've noticed. And to pass it on, I'll ask Malaya, are there any situations that have been exacerbated due to the pandemic that you've noticed?
Well, I'm a advocate for like mental health awareness, and I've noticed like huge decrease of stable mental health, especially like in Native communities, and drug use. And I think like people kind of just look at the drugs like and stereotype again, like, oh, well, they've been there. Like the drugs have always been in the Native communities. They just like to smoke weed and get high. But I think the core issue that people need to start looking at is we're all on lockdown, and some kids have abusive homes or a sick grandmother they have to take care of, and that takes a toll. So kind of like a reach out, I guess. I don't know, but kind of form an understanding of what each kid has to go home to and what each kid is stuck at home with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Adam, what about you? Are there any situations that you've noticed that have been exacerbated or worsened because of the pandemic?
I've realized that I've realized that more adults, they get a little bit more stress, whether that's from risk of losing a job or risk of their kids getting it or other people, and that's about it.
Yeah, a lot of stress is added. Lucinda, what about you? Are there any situations that you might have noticed have become more exacerbated because of the pandemic?
For me, two big key things I want to bring awareness to during this pandemic is one, like you said, because we live on reservations in certain parts of our reservation, it is hard to get internet access and resources for the school to get things done. So I think they could reach out too for that to help us. And the second one is that domestic violence rates have gone up, especially in the Indigenous community since this pandemic. So I think that's something to shed light on and awareness that during this pandemic, the rates have gone up extremely higher than what they were. So those are just two things that I want to bring awareness to today.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It's very important. Um, Jake, what about you? Are there any situations that you've noticed that have worsened because of the pandemic?
Sadly, COVID 19 has actually brought a big drug and alcohol increase in I'm sad to say this, but in our youth actually, because they're out there, they're bored, so they're just gonna experiment with things. They're gonna experiment with pills and smoking and just doing whatever. And I'm sad to say, but it's also brought a lot of overdoses. I've had to bury a couple of friends pretty young, and yeah, that's just like a big topic now is how do we find a way to keep kids occupied during this time because if not, then it's probably just going to get worse and worse with this. It's so much easier for them to access alcohol because what, mom and dad are staying home and they drink, so why not drink with them? Mom and dad are staying home, so I could go out with my friends and do this. It's so sad to see that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I noticed that too with all the overdoses just around in our neighboring communities. Yeah, we've heard about some overdoses too and death, sadly. Um, so yeah. Miracle, what about you? Are there any situations that you noticed that have been worsened because of the pandemic?
Like you were saying, the just lack of motivation. There's really just no motivation to go through school or to get that, one assignment done. It's just basically because they're so used to staying home now. A lot of youth don't want to go to school or they just don't have the motivation. And I think that, that also stems because we don't have the access to education resources. So it was harder, to get um, it's a lot harder to get internet to access to internet or to just even textbooks, anything like that. And those kids were staying home for such a long period of time that they got used to it, so the motivation just isn't there anymore, and the dropout rate is really going up. And that's really sad to see that kids aren't graduating and they just don't have that motivation to even finish school.
Yeah, it's taking a really large toll. um, Priscilla, are there any situations that you noticed?
Um, I was gonna go and talk about, the same thing, the high levels of drug use and all that. But one thing that kind of popped in my head while listening to all this was kind of just lack of parental presentness. You know, a lot of parents like to say, I know my kid, I live with them, you know, but they don't know half the stuff they're doing outside the house. They probably don't even know half the stuff they're doing inside the house. And a lot of parents, you know, like even, you know, adults that I've seen in the community, they like to guard their kids and like to say that my kid does no wrong, and you know, you guys are making things up. It's not them, it's you guys, you know, which causes a lot of our youth to not know what self accountability is or being accountable for their actions, which is why a lot of our youth feel that, oh, it's I can go do drugs. My mom don't care. She don't even care about my grades. She don't even care that I'm failing English. What is she gonna care if I go smoke some weed, you know, with my cousins in the back roads, you know? Or some people that live with their grandmas, you know, other family members, they already feel displaced. They already feel like they're not, you know, worth the work. They don't feel that they're worth having to go to school and finish and be a good student. They just feel that they're being put there because their parent doesn't want to be arrested for truancies, you know? Um, so that's something that I've seen is just lack of parents being parents and trying to push their kids onto organizations and recreational places to watch them. And like I said, Native peoples, where our interconnectedness is what makes us. Our connections is what strengthens us. And if we don't have good connections in our own household with our own families, it's going to be really hard to make connections with other natives and non-natives and get people to understand where we're coming from. So that's the one thing that I wanted to shine light on.
Thank you. That was the last question from us. Thank you.
Yes. And we wanted to thank all the panelists for talking. Anthony and myself, we are still also young people. So I just want to say personally that it's awesome seeing you guys take time out of your day to do this Zoom call. You know, cheers to you. I raise my hands to you guys. And, you know, if you guys ever want to work, we're here. You guys have our email stuff, but I just want to say I'm super proud of you, you students, and I want to thank the San Diego County Office of Education for giving us this platform to use our voice. So thank you from me.
Yes, thank you.
And Anthony.
So I wanted to say thank you to the audience as well, and to the students for spending their time and sharing their stories and their wisdom. I know that just listening to stories right now, I keep thinking about this need for honoring and cultural education. I heard the terms generational trauma, elementary school, and then even just last week. So this is something that's still ongoing that we have to keep in mind. There's also, I heard this need for social emotional support, especially right now through COVID, that the community needs. And while we don't specify school districts or school systems, this is not just in one particular place, but it's across the county. And we also want to highlight that Valley Center is intentionally leading the county in their multi-year improvement initiatives and to improve their schools for American Indian students. And they've led even the county in Circles of Equity projects. So there is some work being done moving forward. I do want to leave because with this thought, and I actually want to thank you, Adam, because you are actually, I think what you shared was really beautiful, which is this notion of how can you get mad at someone who doesn't know? The level of kindness and maturity that statement resonated with me. You will be one of my North Stars when I think about things like this. Like, so how can I get mad at someone if they don't know? Kindness rules. And if ever in doubt, ask that question. So thank you for your wisdom this afternoon, and thank you for joining us, audience members. Thank you.